Thank you very much. uh, it's quite interesting that I'm talking about police enforcement. I'm not a policeman, and I'm not a lawyer. And a long time back, I did my PhD on the mechanical properties of the descending human aorta. So the connection from my thesis and today's presentation is a long distance because my original research was on biomechanics, and today I'm talking on police enforcement. And that is because in the decade of safety, we are being told by all the experts that we should reduce speeds, drunken driving, increase helmet use, increase seatbelt use, and uh, daytime running lights. Almost all the suggestions of the experts, international experts for our countries, almost all of it involves enforcement. And what is very important, especially for people like us from India, is that in India, the politicians think that enforcement is having very strict punishment for the drivers. So we have looked at the data available in the world on how do you have effective enforcement with good result. So basically, we have been talking in 2 days about design and environment and enforcement, which is behavior. So we will only focus today on, just now in the last lecture, on enforcement. So what we did is we have looked at the scientific literature, especially studies which have done what is called a systematic review or a literature review systematically. And we have tried to find out what everyone has understood, the scientists, about enforcement. And what's very interesting is that for different kinds of situations, you need different kind of enforcement. For example, for helmets, for seat belts, for alcohol, for speed. And as we will see, that some need less enforcement and some need more enforcement. So we should know what are those levels and what is the theory. We have used for our literature search the Handbook of Road Safety Measures, which the 2009 edition is available on the internet by Elwick and Ba. And hey, it's a very, very useful source for systematic reviews for everything in road safety. It's 2009. We have used the Cochrane Injuries Review because the Cochrane reviews are mostly in medicine, but they have one section in Cochrane reviews on injury prevention. So they also do systematic reviews. A group has been formed which is called the Community Preventive Services Task Force, and they are also doing systematic reviews. And we also use the ancestry approach, that is, when you read a paper on a systematic review, you have references. So you go back to a reference which you have not seen to see what evidence you have. And we have not included very much literature published before 1990, because this is not a complete, what we have done is not a very, what should I say, in the modern understanding of systematic reviews, this review is not that systematic. But we think that what we are saying is not very wrong. So what do we know about fines? When you fine people or punish people, what do we know? So according to the systematic reviews, the idea of punishment, the idea of a fine, is that people will not do the wrong thing because they are scared. But the evidence shows that they are not so much worried about being fined, they are more worried about being stopped. So if people think they are not being stopped, then the fine does not matter. So it is very important for people to think that the probability of being stopped is high. Strict punishment, according to the reviews, is not important. What is important is the subjective perception, that is, what people think, not reality. If people think they will be stopped on the road for doing something wrong, that is more important than strict punishment. Thirdly, for enforcement, the police operations or electronic devices should be highly visible. If they are not visible, people, by sending a fine in the internet, is not so effective unless they know on the road all the time that they are being caught. So if no one sees other people being caught on the road that only you know, and you pay the fine on the internet, that will not be very effective, because stopping people for doing something wrong should be visible to other road users also. Or when you are on the road, you should know that you can get caught because there are signs for the camera, signs for the speed camera, signs for the red light camera, and so on. There's very little evidence that severe punishment or penalties reduce violations, especially jail sentences, because the courts do not like to give too many jail sentences to ordinary people. And in many countries, jail sentences are given to poor people, and they are not given to important people. So then the enforcement gets a very bad reputation in the public, that only poor people are being punished and important people are not being punished. But if the punishment is not very serious, then the punishment becomes more fair, then more people get it. And so it has a better effect. And also making publicity of how many people were caught every week or every month for violation, and showing that it had a benefit. So you say, we have fined so many people for not wearing a helmet. Then more people wear helmets, then you have to say that because we have fined people, number of deaths have reduced. So people must know that the law and the punishment is helping people. But the evidence is that this cannot be done for a long time. And when you stop doing it, the effect reduces. This is a complicated graph. It has only been done once in the history of road safety. And so it has not been replicated. This is from Europe. What it basically shows on the x-axis is how many drivers have to be checked. So this means more drivers, this means less drivers. This is what percent of people are breaking the law. Now, don't try and understand the graph, just listen to me, because this is very complicated. It has ratios and so on. But what it shows is that basically that if you want to have a good effect on drinking and driving, you have to have a very high level of enforcement. And if you have to have for seat belts and helmets, you can have less enforcement. And don't just worry about the x-axis because numbers are different. The x values are different. But what this graph shows is that any problem which can be seen by the policeman from a long distance is easy to enforce. And something which cannot be seen easily is difficult to enforce. So for drinking and driving, you have to have a lot of policemen checking on the road every day for a long time, for 20 years. For helmets, You don't need uh, uh, too many policemen checking, because every motorcycle driver knows that the policeman can see him from half a kilometer or 1 kilometer. So, for example, my students who I teach in my university, I teach them for 4 months that they should wear a helmet. So they don't wear a helmet. So my teaching is quite useless. But they wear a helmet when they go outside the campus, because inside the campus there is no policeman. When they go outside the campus, they know the policeman can see him from a long distance. And so just outside the campus, they put the helmet on. So they have to worry that they are being stopped. It does not matter what is the fine, because especially for helmets and seat belts, no one likes to be stopped by the policeman, because you get angry, you have to give some money, you get delayed, you lose 20 minutes. No one is going to their office or to their friend's house half an hour before time. So if a policeman stops you, you're always late. So being stopped is more important than the fine. So this graph shows that you must know that for easiest is helmets, because it can be seen from long distance. Motorcycle headlight in the daytime is very easy. You can see it from a kilometer. So if it's a law, people will put it. It's very easy to enforce. Helmet laws are very easy to enforce. Wherever the government has done it, either in a poor country or a rich country, within 2 months, 80% people are wearing helmets. In Delhi, in my city in India, where it is enforced in the daytime, 85–90% people wear helmets. In the same country, just 100 kilometers away, where it is in the other state where it is not enforced, only 20% wear helmets. So it shows same culture, same people, same police. If it is enforced, 85, it is not enforced, 20. And it is easy to enforce. So in Delhi, they have enforced it for 19 years now. So same thing in Indonesia. The president of Indonesia said that helmets cannot be enforced because Indonesian women have a different culture. They have a very nice hairstyle, so they don't like to wear helmets. But after a lot of pressure, when in Indonesia, in Jakarta, when the police chief started enforcing the helmets, within 2 months, 80% were wearing helmets, including the women. So culture should not be used as an excuse, because if you say our culture is different, it gives the politicians a good excuse not to do anything. So culture is a very bad idea in road safety. It is not important, and people behave if the correct thing is done. So what this graph actually shows is that in this graph, you needed 250 checks per 1,000 drivers for drinking and driving, and only 8 for seatbelts use, for the same effect of less than 15% violations. And the reason you can't see it easily on the graph is because they have different ratios for x-axis and y-axis for drinking and driving and seatbelt. So the problem is that this kind of study has not been done again. And this was done 17 years ago. It has not been done in different countries. I think it is very important for us to do such studies to understand what works and what you need. So, speed control. What works in speed control? What we know that speed cameras have resulted in reduction in crashes. How much? It depends on what is the design and what distances. My understanding is in China, there are a lot of speed cameras. and the density differs from city to city and province. That would be a fantastic project to do a one-year study in different places to see the effect of speed cameras on accidents. Because there are very few countries where you can do this. To my information, in the low and middle income countries, you can do it in China and you can do it in Iran. Iran also has put a lot of speed cameras. We don't have many speed cameras in India, so we cannot do the study. But I think it will be a contribution from China if you study your speed cameras in different rural locations, urban locations, highways, small roads, and to find out, does it work on motorcycles, does it work on cars? And I think that would be a contribution. But we know it works. And we also know that speed cameras are not for punishing people. Speed cameras are for making people slow down. And therefore, if you have signs there, speed camera, people slow down. What's your map? In the West, they have the Google map. Here it is. What map do you have, Gucci? For the map on the cell phone? No, what is it called? The app. Okay, so now the Google map tells you in Europe speed camera coming up. Same here. That's very good. Because the idea is not to find people. The idea is that if a speed camera is coming up, you will slow down. So the objective is slowing down people. So your app should tell you speed camera is coming. It is very good. So we must understand that the objective of laws and penalties is not to punish people. It is for making them change their behavior. If they have to be punished, maybe. But so speed cameras are very useful. We also know that section control, which is not one place, but measuring the speed between two cameras, that's quite effective. But we also know that the effectiveness of speed cameras reduces as you go away from the camera. And so that's a problem with speed cameras. So it is very important to know where people were speeding and put cameras there. But we are very intelligent people that once you put cameras there, we will start speeding somewhere else. So it is a dynamic process. There is no empirical information on the effects of speeding and crash outcomes in very wide areas, say in a country. You know what the speed cameras do in locations. There is almost no reliable study on the effectiveness of speed cameras, which can be generalized in numbers. So I can't say it's 30% reduction in death. In some places it is 30% reduction in death. Red light cameras, we know in some places it is 40% reduction in crashes. But we don't have data which can be generalized around the world. So it is very important for different people to continue doing such work. So average speed enforcement method may be more effective than locations. So, for example, on expressways, measuring speeds between two toll booths and finding them if the average speed is more has some effect, but we don't have enough systematic review of. So what I'm trying to say is that there are a lot of studies and people will tell you this work, but we still don't have enough to give you exact numbers, and we don't have enough data to tell you what should be the level of how many policemen do you need by police enforcement. We don't know enough. Seatbelts and helmets, we have already discussed. This is very easy. Enforcing seatbelts and helmets is very easy to do. We also know that by education, it is very difficult to get more than 20%. If you want to have more than 20% use of seatbelts and helmets, then you have to have a compulsory law and enforce it. Almost no country has increased seatbelt use or helmet use by education more than 20%. And so that we know, we don't have to do more studies. It is no point doing a study why people, it is useless study to find out why people don't wear helmets. If you have ever driven a motorcycle, why should I wear? It is uncomfortable. It's not fun. Young people like to have fun on a motorcycle. So educating them to not have fun is very stupid. So helmet laws need enforcement, helmet use. Same thing with seatbelts. We have a lot of data on seatbelt use, which has to be done by enforcement. And it is easy to enforce because it is visible. Secondly, we don't have, again, exact numbers for this, but it appears because seatbelt use has been high in Europe now for 20 years, and in the US, in most states for about 20 years. Helmet use has been high in many countries for again 20 years, 15 years. It seems that you have to enforce it for 15 years, 20 years. After that, it becomes more of a habit. But it does not become a habit in 2 years, or 3 years, or 5 years. We don't know the exact length, but it appears it may be 20 years, or 15 years, or 25 years. After that, it becomes easy. But the problem is we will retire before that. So you have to think that when you start your profession, you have to do it all your life, that job. And after that, your son or daughter will have an easier time. But it seems to be about 20 years when people get used and start doing it more easily. But you cannot stop enforcement completely, even after that. You can reduce it. Yeah.
So you mean the format you enforcement is enforced and evaluation. But according to my own experience, if you want to stop the riders or bicyclists or motorcyclists, we have to need a lot of policemen at the spot to stop the riders. So it's unaffordable for many places in China.
Well, Delhi is much poorer than China. We could do it 20 years ago. Our per capita income 20 years ago was only $700. So it's not a problem of expenditure. Initially, you have to stop many people, and it must be seen. After 1 year, you don't need so many people.
So in China, for the road traffic law enforcement, the government have specific phenomenon. So in some time, so they spend a lot of human resources to increase the strength of enforcement. But other time, so they go back to the normal state.
You see, Vietnam, you go to Vietnam. Vietnam is one of the poorest countries in the world. And they have 90% of the vehicles in Vietnam are motorcycles.
Yes, I know. So there, the helmet use reach very high proportion.
Only in last 2 years.
Yes.
Because they became serious. Before that, they were finding excuses. It needs people, it needs money, it needs this. So as long as the police department is finding excuses, it will not happen. And it needs the police chief. The junior policeman has to know the police chief is serious. We know this from India. In cities where it is not happening, the junior policeman says that I get a phone call from the senior policeman not to be strict. So we have to know the internal mechanism on what's happening. So because the policeman on the road is very junior. And so he must think he has support of the senior people. These are mechanics of enforcement, especially police. Red light cameras are very effective, uh, and I think they should be effective in Chinese cities because you don't have motorcycles, big cities. We have a problem with red light cameras because the cameras get very confused in India. Because there are 3 lanes, and we have three-wheel taxis, and we have motorcycles, and so on, so people make 5 lanes or 6 lanes. And so the speed cameras get very confused, and they cannot find the number plate, they cannot, and so on and so forth. But if you have traffic like China, then where there are mostly cars in the big cities, then red light cameras should be quite effective. Now again, we have to find out what is the effectiveness, where should they be placed, and when people know that they're red light cameras, you don't have to put them in every junction. You have to have some idea of the proportion. And you put a sign saying, red light camera may be present here. So with 10 cameras, maybe you can do 40 junctions and move them every month. So then you have to have laws which allow you to do it. Some countries do not allow you to do that. So the police law should allow you to do it. So there are many methods of reducing the cost. But at the same time, it's very important for policemen to be on the road. We have a serious problem in my country that policemen think they're very intelligent and they want to use the latest technology and they only want IT and apps and cameras and so on. They don't understand that we are very intelligent people, all of us, everyone in the world. We know how to take care of those things, but we don't know how to take care of another human being. So we are scared of human beings on the road, and we see them. So in addition to technology, we must have human being policemen on the road who stop people. Because people feel insulted if they are stopped, people get delayed if they are stopped, and 200 other people see other people getting stopped. So people getting stopped is also an education for many people. And just electronics does not give that education. This is drinking under the influence is a very difficult. How do you reduce drinking and driving? Sweden made very strict laws. Swedish people are very proud of everything. They think whatever they do is very good. But they started very strict drinking and driving laws 50 years ago. But their death rate did not reduce for a long time. And even today, according to research studies, about 15 to 20% of their deaths are drinking and driving. So drinking and driving is very difficult to control, and you have to find methods, and the only method is stopping people on the road. There's no other method. Until a few years from now, we'll get the modern technology for sensing micro particles of alcohol in the driver cabin. And that may happen, 5, 10 years from now.
No, you can do it with the ignition interlocks.
Ignition interlocks, but that's...
Literally, when you push the button on a button start car, you can be sensing alcohol at the same time.
So, what we're saying is that for our countries, like what you said, the investment. For India, China, Malaysia, Philippines, etc., it may be very useful for us to invest a lot of money on research in the new technology for automatic alcohol interlocks in the vehicle. That may be cheaper than policemen. And I think there's a lot of opposition in Western countries to interlocks. But I think if we start now on investing a lot of money in technology for alcohol sensing in the car, we may be more successful. Same thing in alcohol. People are scared of being stopped. If you ask people say, I'm not drinking because I'm driving. That does not mean everyone is doing it. No one will say, I'm drinking because I'm driving. So anyone who says, I'm not drinking because I'm driving, is a nice person. People who drink and drive are not nice persons. So we only meet nice persons who say, I don't drink and drive. That does not mean that 10% or 15% of the drivers who drink every day are not drinking before driving. Because they will never tell you. So personal contact does not tell you anything about the reality. So reality has to come from testing on the road. So and the alcohol checking has to be highly visible, and we have no idea on what is the correct level. And I'll show you the next table, which is very interesting. That you see here that these are different countries in Europe. Sweden is here. It has proportion of alcohol-related fatalities. What's very interesting is, even in Sweden, the official estimate is an underestimate, according to experts. Experts say 25%, officials say 16%. But what's interesting here is that Austria, and I will not ask Herman to explain, but Austria has 6% official statistics and 18% expert estimates for drinking and driving. But what is very interesting here is, for which there is no scientific explanation, that Austria has only 87 checks per 1,000 inhabitants, and Sweden has 287 tests. Now, if the international experts tell us that you must control drinking and driving by checking on the road, they should also tell us what is the correct number for checking. The reason they don't tell us is because they don't know. So, no, not just now. Afterwards, in the coffee time. So, the point is that we have to experiment. And suppose you do in one Changsha, you do one experiment, drinking and driving and checking, and you do it in somewhere else, and compare the results of the effect. But it's also very difficult to compare the effects. Because suppose you have drinking and driving checking, in the same time you make more roundabouts in the city, and the deaths go down. How do you know what is being effective? Because it is difficult for a drunken driver to kill someone on a roundabout. So roundabouts are also good for drunken drivers, because they cannot have an accident. So in our field, these are difficult things. So if you say, I want to reduce deaths because drinking and driving, make roundabouts. Put more speed humps on the road. Because even a drinking driver will not drive too fast on a speed breaker in the neighborhood. So I wanted to show this, that these are very different checking numbers. And they do not correspond with the estimate of drinking and driving deaths. If you draw a graph, you don't get a strong correlation. And I think it is up to us, who are being taught by other people what to do, that we do our own research. And that's why it's very important for us to do our own research, and we may find something new. And this is very important. And the other thing is that, you see, Sweden has a blood alcohol limit of 0.2 and Austria has 0.5. Obviously, the number of drinking and driving violations in Austria will be less than Sweden, because alcohol levels are higher. So legally, there are less drinking driving drivers in Austria. So it's very difficult to compare statistics when your laws are different. USA is 0.8. So they have even less drinking and driving, if you just take 0.8 as a legal issue. So we have to find our own details. So this is what I wanted to point out, that they have similar drinking and driving deaths, but checking is very different. So I would like to finish by saying that, number one, please don't focus on having very strict punishment. There's enough data from some Western countries, New Zealand, that strict penalties, especially the US, there's a lot of work done on penalties in the US, the strict penalties do not help you so much. And from India, we don't have scientific studies, but we have people studies. People studies meaning that if you kill or hurt a young man or a boy or a girl in a village or a small town, or even in some cities, there's a crowd which gathers, and they will beat you up. And they might burn your car. So India has the strictest punishment and the quickest judicial system. In 15 minutes, you're punished and beaten up. But we have a high accident rate. So without doing a systematic review, I can guess that Indians are not worried. And every Indian knows that if I kill a child, I might get beaten up. If I have an accident in a village, my car might get burned within 15-20 minutes. No court in Europe will give you judgment in 15 minutes. So quick punishment, strict punishment, does not seem to reduce accidents too much. So we have scientific data from the West, and we have people's data from India. By the way, in India, people on their own in 500,000-600,000 villages have made illegal speed bumps against the government order, because the highway department says you cannot put speed bumps. But when a child gets killed in any village, the next day they make a speed bump. So a rough estimate is that uneducated villagers, poor people without any money spent by the government, we may be saving 20,000, 30,000 lives a year. So safety is very cheap. Government has spent no money. So we have to learn from our own societies what works with or without government. And if it works, then we bring it into our science and say what we should do with it. And therefore, what are the research studies we should do is influence of road, what is the influence of road infrastructure on violation? If your design is wrong of the road, then more people will violate the law, especially pedestrians. If your road is 40 meters wide, people will take more risks to cross the road. Okay? If there is no pedestrian crossing for half a kilometer, more people will cross without the red light. So we must do work on where is more violation and how much is people's behavior influenced by design. So are people breaking the law because the design is wrong? And we must do that. We cannot blame people, we must blame the engineer, the chief engineer, the minister, and the president for people breaking the law. Because people's behavior is based on the environment. So we can do these studies, and I think it's very easy to see. You have so much people in your public school of public health and so many schools of public health to find different places with different designs and calculate the violations in different locations. That would be a fantastic addition to our area of knowledge. It doesn't exist easily. But then, second thing we have to understand is what level of enforcement do we need? How many policemen? How many checks for different violations? Because exact data are not available. And what are the enforcement methods, which is the last point, which are cost effective in situations with high proportion of pedestrians and motorcycles? Because I think traffic management and regulations and violations will be different where you have more cars and no pedestrians. It is easy for Sweden or Finland to say we have reduced pedestrian accidents, because if I'm in Sweden, I have to go hunting for a pedestrian to kill him. I can't find a pedestrian to kill. There are people walking. If you go to Europe, if you at night, you can't find anyone walking. So obviously the one will get killed if they're not walking. In our countries, people are still walking, bicycling, motorcycle. So I think our needs and our regulations and our enforcement, we have to find ways which are cheaper, different, which will be more effective, because a lot of regulation has to do with cars only, and how to punish pedestrians and keep them out. We should find ways how do you have pedestrians and bicyclists on the road in more numbers, and what laws for the cars and the environment and the design. And then you reduce the need for police then. I think that's the other issue, and I'll end with this, that if you do the study of violation by design, then you'll also find out that if certain designs reduce violations, then you need less policemen. Okay? So I think these are the new areas where we really need to do research, and thank you very much for having me.
Let's thank you, Dr. Mohan.